The morning began like any other for Elena. The countryside was wrapped in a soft, gray fog that made everything look distant and half asleep. Her old estate sat quietly on the hill, surrounded by tall trees and a garden that had once been beautiful. Now the garden was overgrown, much like the parts of her heart she no longer cared to visit. Elena, now in her mid-30s, lived alone by choice. She woke at the same hour every day, for in the morning, before the sun, before the birds, before any memories could rise to meet her. She made her tea, stood by the kitchen window, and watched the mist creep across the grass like a living thing. It was a routine that kept her steady, a routine that kept the past from flooding in. Most people would have called her cold or distant, but Elena simply felt tired. Tired of remembering, tired of hurting, tired of pretending she was okay. That morning, as she stepped outside to check the garden fence, something felt different. The air was heavier. Even the fog seemed thicker than usual, drifting low across the ground as if it wanted to hide something. She walked slowly, her boots leaving faint prints on the damp earth. The garden hedge came into view, wild, untrimmed, and bending under the weight of morning dew. Then she saw it, a small shape, still, half hidden by the hedge. At first, she thought it was an animal, maybe a stray dog. But the shape moved, slowly, trembling, and she froze. Her breath caught in her throat. A child. It was a child. Elena's heart kicked painfully against her ribs. She hadn't been this close to a child in years. Not since the day everything changed. The fog shifted, and the figure became clearer. A young boy, no older than 7, stood barefoot on the cold ground. His hair was messy, his skin pale, and his thin arms hugged his chest as if he were trying to hold himself together. Elena took one cautious step forward. "Hey," she called gently, unsure if her voice would even reach him. The boy flinched. He looked up at her slowly, his eyes wide and glassy. Confusion rested on his face, mixed with something else, fear, or maybe pain. She couldn't tell. "Are you hurt?" she asked, taking another step. "Do you need help?" The boy just stared at her. There was something unsettling about his expression. Not dangerous, just strange, like he was trying to remember something important. Elena's hands shook. She didn't know why. A cold wind brushed past her, lifting the ends of her hair. The boy shivered harder. She knelt down so she wouldn't tower over him. "Where are your parents? Did you get lost? Tell me your name." The boy blinked slowly. His lips parted. "Elena." The single word sliced through the quiet morning like a blade. Her stomach dropped. She felt her skin tighten, her breath stumble. She had not told him her name. She was sure she had never met him. There was no possible reason a strange child should know who she was. How do you know my name?" she whispered. The boy didn't answer. He simply held her gaze, his small body trembling as if from cold or fear of something unseen. A thick silence settled between them, heavy with questions Elena wasn't ready to face. The world around her felt tilted, stretched, unfamiliar. A child she had never seen stood in her garden, barefoot in the fog, saying her name as if he had known it all his life. She rose slowly, torn between fear, concern, and a strange tug deep in her chest. Something she couldn't explain, something that felt painfully familiar. The fog swirled around them, and nothing about this morning felt ordinary anymore. Elena stood frozen, staring at the trembling boy who somehow knew her name. The fog curled around them like a quiet warning, and for a long moment she wasn't sure what to do. Her mind raced. Should she call for help, bring him inside, or walk away and pretend none of this was happening? But she couldn't walk away. No matter how much she wanted to stay distant, something inside her wouldn't let her leave him there. "You're freezing," she said softly, her voice steadier than she felt. "Come inside for a moment, just until we figure things out." The boy didn't move at first. He looked toward the woods behind the house, as if expecting something or someone to come out of the trees. Then, slowly, he stepped toward her, almost drifting rather than walking. Elena swallowed hard and led him across the yard. The grass was wet and cold, and she winced with every step he took on his bare feet. Once they reached the back porch, she paused. A part of her still wasn't sure about letting him in. Her house had been her safe place, her hiding place. No one had crossed its doorway in a long time. But the boy looked so small, so lost, so scared. She opened the door. Warm air rushed out to meet them, carrying the faint smell of tea and old wooden floors. The boy stepped inside without a word, his eyes moving slowly around the room like he already knew the space. Elena shut the door behind them and locked it out of habit. "Sit down," she said gently, pointing to the couch. "I'll get you a blanket." As she turned away, the boy spoke for the first time since saying her name. "They'll come for me," he whispered. Elena stiffened. "Ooh," but he didn't answer. He only stared down at his shaking hands. A chill ran down her spine. Something about his voice, soft, frightened, lonely, pulled at old wounds she kept buried deep. She grabbed a thick blanket from the hall closet and wrapped it around him. His body felt cold, almost too cold, like he'd been outside for far longer than she first thought. "Do you want water?" she asked, trying to sound calm. He nodded. As Elena filled a glass in the kitchen, memories she fought hard to forget rose to the surface. A flash of her little brother's hand slipping from hers. His laughter echoing in the garden. His cry, sharp, sudden, before everything went silent forever. The pain of that day still lived inside her, raw and heavy, and it was the reason she never allowed children near her life again. She blinked hard, pushing the memory away. This was not the time. When she returned, the boy was sitting quietly, his eyes focused on the bookshelf across the room. He looked strangely calm now, wrapped in the blanket like he belonged there. "Here," she said, handing him the glass. He took it carefully, as if afraid he might drop it, and drank slowly. "What's your name?" Elena asked. The boy hesitated. I don't know." She frowned. "You don't know your own name?" He shook his head, eyes clouded with fear. "I just remember you." Her breath caught. That strange, heavy feeling inside her deepened. "Remember you." It didn't make sense, yet the words hit something deep inside her chest. "Where are you from?" she tried again. He stared down at the blanket. "I don't want to go back." "Back where?" He shook his head again, tighter this time, shrinking into the blanket as if trying to disappear. His whole body trembled, not from cold now, but from something darker, fear of something she couldn't see. Elena sat on the edge of a nearby chair, her thoughts spinning. She wondered if she should call the police or child services. A missing child was serious. Someone might be searching for him. Someone might be worried sick. But when she looked at him again, his small shoulders shaking, his bare feet tucked under the blanket, his frightened eyes, it felt wrong to send him away. It felt wrong to let strangers take him when he clearly didn't want to go. Then he said something that made her heart stop. "Your favorite flowers are the white ones," he murmured, looking toward the kitchen window. "The ones under the willow tree." Elena froze. She had never told anyone that. Those flowers were tied to a memory she kept locked away, hidden with the other pieces of her broken past. "And you wake up when it's still dark," he added quietly. "At 4. You always do." She felt her throat tighten. Her chest grew heavy. This child, this strange, shivering boy, knew things no one could possibly know. Slowly, she let out a shaky breath. "Okay," she whispered. "You can stay just for now, until we understand what's happening." The boy looked up at her with a mix of relief and exhaustion, as if he had been waiting for her to say those exact words. Elena sat in silence, her mind full of questions she was too afraid to ask. The house felt different now, less empty but heavier somehow, and as the fog outside thickened, she felt the first hint of a truth she wasn't ready to face. The boy wasn't just a stranger. He was something far more unsettling. The first hour passed in uneasy silence. Elena stayed near the kitchen counter, pretending to tidy up while keeping an eye on the boy. He sat curled on the couch, the blanket wrapped tightly around him. He didn't cry. He didn't ask questions. He simply watched the room with quiet, steady eyes that seemed older than his small body. Every now and then, he glanced at her softly, like he was checking to make sure she was still there. It made her chest tighten in a way she didn't like. After giving him a little time to rest, Elena decided she needed to understand what was happening. She wasn't used to speaking softly anymore, but she tried. "Are you warmer now?" she asked. He nodded. She cleared her throat, unsure how to continue. "You said you don't remember your name, but do you remember anything else? Where you came from? Anyone you were with?" The boy lowered his gaze. "It was dark." "Dark?" she asked gently. He nodded again, this time slower. "I was lost. For a long time. Then, I found you." The answer made no sense. Elena folded her arms, trying to hide the discomfort rising inside her. "Found me? How?" she asked. The boy hesitated, squinting like he was searching through memories that didn't want to be found. "You were the only thing I could see." Her heart thudded in her chest. Before she could ask more, the boy quietly stood and wandered away from the couch. Elena straightened, ready to stop him from exploring, but he walked with strange ease, as if he already knew the house. "Where are you going?" she asked. He didn't answer. He walked down the hallway, stopping in front of the small wooden cabinet she kept near the stairs. It was a piece she almost never touched. Inside were her most personal memories: old letters, faded photos, and a tiny silver whistle her younger brother used to carry everywhere. No one knew about that cabinet. Not anymore. Elena stepped forward quickly. "Don't." But the boy had already opened it. His small hand reached inside and touched the silver whistle gently, almost lovingly. He didn't take it out. He just held it for a moment with an expression that made her skin prickle. "How do you know what's in there?" she asked, her voice breaking a little. The boy let go of the whistle and slowly shut the cabinet door. When he turned back to her, his eyes looked different, softer, sadder, as if he understood more than he should. "I just remember," he whispered. Elena's breath trembled. This wasn't normal. Children didn't wander into strangers' homes and find places they shouldn't know about. They didn't name private memories or walk hallways with the confidence of someone who had lived there before. Elena's confusion was turning to fear. She followed him as he wandered toward the living room again. He passed by the old piano, untouched for years. The lid was dusty, the keys yellow from age. But as the boy walked past, his fingers brushed the wood lightly. Then, without thinking, he began humming. It was a soft, simple tune, one that floated gently through the room. And the moment she heard it, Elena felt the world tilt. Her knees almost buckled. That tune, that exact melody. Her younger brother, Nikolai, used to hum it when he played in the garden. It had been his favorite. He hummed it the morning Elena pressed her hand over her mouth, stopping the memory before it crushed her. "How do you know that song?" she whispered. The boy stopped humming. He turned to her with a puzzled expression, as if the song had come from somewhere deep, somewhere he couldn't explain. "It just came," he murmured, "like it was already inside me." Elena lowered herself onto the nearest chair before her legs gave out. Her hands shook uncontrollably, and she felt that old ache in her chest, the one she fought to bury every single day. This child was connected to her past in ways that made no sense. She looked at him again, trying to remain steady. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The boy looked down at his hands, twisting the blanket between his fingers. "I don't know," he said softly, "but I'm supposed to find you." "Why?" she pressed. His eyes lifted slowly, and a shiver ran through her when she saw the emptiness and sadness inside them. "Because I was lost in the dark," he said, "and you're the only one who could see me." Elena felt the room shrink around her. Questions swirled inside her, heavy and unsettling. Nothing about this situation was normal. Nothing about this child was ordinary. And yet, deep inside her heart, where she had buried all her grief, something stirred. A pain she had avoided for years was being pulled to the surface by a boy who shouldn't know anything about her. The mystery tightened its grip around her, pulling her deeper into a truth she wasn't ready to face. But one thing was certain. This boy was not here by accident. Elena had spent her entire adult life perfecting the art of silence, quiet routines, quiet emotions, quiet memories. The world saw her as composed, self-reliant, almost serene in the way she moved through her days. But serenity was rarely the truth of a person. More often, it was what remained after all the storms had already passed. And for Elena, there had been storms, violent ones, the kind that leave a person broken in places no one can see. For the first time in years, someone was standing inside her home, small and fragile, unknowingly tugging at threads she had carefully knotted shut. Adam didn't speak often, but when he did, something in his voice, its softness, its strange certainty, felt like the echo of a life she had spent years trying to leave behind. She tried to dismiss it. He was just a lost child, frightened, confused. Children said strange things when they were scared. That's what she told herself as she cleaned the dirt from his face, as she watched him trace the patterns on her living room carpet with distant eyes, as she noticed the way he flinched at sudden sounds. But then there were the other moments, small, unsettling details that tightened her chest, like the way he walked through her home as though he recognized it, or how he paused at the old family portrait she kept tucked away on a hallway shelf, his expression warping into quiet fear, or how he sometimes whispered her name at night, not as a plea, but as though it belonged to a memory he couldn't quite grasp. These little cracks were enough to let the past seep in. Elena had not always lived alone. Once, her home had been noisy with laughter, arguments, footsteps racing up and down the hallway. She had once been a mother, or almost one. The memory remained sharp despite its age. The day she discovered she was pregnant, the trembling joy she had felt, and then the shattering loss that followed too soon, too violently. It was a grief so vast and unforgiving she had spent years learning not to drown in it. She rarely spoke of it to anyone, not family, not friends, not herself. She had convinced herself she had healed. But Adam, this fragile, strange child, was reopening wounds she thought had turned to scar. Late one night, after she finally coaxed the boy to sleep, Elena sat alone in the dim glow of her kitchen light. She told herself she was being overdramatic, that stress was warping simple coincidences into something darker. But the truth pressed against her ribs like a fist. The boy looked too much like someone he shouldn't. A child who never had a chance to grow. A child who should have been hers. She pushed the thought away, horrified by it. Grief played tricks on the mind, she reminded herself. Trauma distorted reality, painted faces over strangers, whispered meanings into meaningless things. She wasn't losing her grip. She was just tired, overwhelmed, out of practice at caring for someone other than herself. And yet, the questions would not stop forming, would not stop growing. Why did he know her name? How did he find his way to her home? Why did he cling to her with such desperate familiarity? Why did he wake from nightmares crying out things that made no sense, and yet made too much sense to her? By the time dawn touched the horizon, Elena realized she could no longer ignore it. Her past was no longer content with silence. It wanted to be acknowledged, confronted, understood. And as she watched Adam sleep, his small hands curled, his expression softening for the first time since she found him, Elena felt something heavy shift inside her chest. Fear, yes, but also sorrow, and something dangerously close to hope. It was this hope that frightened her the most, because hope was fragile. Hope could break her all over again. Yet she couldn't step away. Not now. Not when this child, this strange boy who seemed carved from shadows of her past, was lying beneath her roof, needing her in ways she didn't yet understand. For the first time in years, Elena understood that her old wounds had not vanished. They had simply been waiting. And Adam's arrival was the beginning of their unearthing. The following days unfolded with a slow, gnawing tension, like a storm gathering behind a sky that refused to darken. Elena tried to maintain some sense of normalcy, giving Adam warm meals, clean clothes, gentle reassurances. But beneath every small act of care, there was a constant tremor of unease. Something was not aligning. Something was off. Adam was recovering physically, yet emotionally he seemed suspended between two worlds. One he remembered, one he feared, and one he refused to explain. Elena noticed how he watched the doorways, as though expecting someone, or something, to appear. How he refused to sleep unless the hallway light was on. How he stiffened whenever she asked where he came from. But more than anything, it was the clues he left behind, quiet, accidental fragments of truth that deepened the mystery. The first clue appeared one morning when Elena found Adam staring at a faded photo tucked behind magnets on her refrigerator. It was a picture taken over a decade ago, she and her sister smiling awkwardly at a family gathering. Her sister had been the wild one, the wanderer, the one who disappeared from town without much explanation and with no intention to return. Elena rarely thought of her now. The relationship had been complicated, love tangled with resentment, loyalty frayed by betrayal. Her sister had left during the darkest period of Elena's life, when she needed someone most. Since then, the silence between them had been mutual, almost comfortable in its finality. But Adam looked at the photograph as though it held secrets he wasn't supposed to know. When Elena asked if he recognized the woman beside her, he hesitated too long, too carefully, before shaking his head. A child shouldn't be that cautious. A child shouldn't measure silence before offering it. The second clue came from a way he walked through the house. He moved with an uncanny familiarity, not the comfort of a child exploring a new place, but the ease of someone retracing old paths. He knew which floorboards creaked, which rooms stayed cold in the mornings, which cabinet held the first aid kit. Elena watched these small acts with growing concern, telling herself it was coincidence, nothing more. But between coincidence and intuition, her heart leaned toward intuition. The third clue revealed itself in the garden, the very place she found him. Elena was tending the soil when she caught Adam standing beside the old willow tree, his fingertips resting against the trunk. His eyes were glossy, distant, almost mournful. When she approached him, he jolted as though waking from a nightmare. And without thinking, he whispered, "It wasn't supposed to happen here." Elena froze. "What wasn't supposed to happen?" she asked softly. But Adam shut down instantly, curling into himself, refusing to speak another word. It was the first moment Elena felt true alarm, not for herself, but for him. The child carried fear heavy enough to reshape his entire posture. She recognized that kind of fear. She had worn it once too, after her loss, when every corner of her home felt haunted, when every quiet sound felt louder than truth. The fourth clue appeared that evening, though it wasn't a thing Adam did, but something Elena stumbled upon. As she gathered the boy's dirty clothes to wash them, she found folded in his pocket a small piece of torn paper. At first, she assumed it was trash, something he had picked up, but when she unfolded it, her breath caught in her chest. It was her name, written in a child's shaky handwriting. No address, no explanation, just her name, as though he had been searching for her, as though he had been brought to her. The realization sent a chill through her. Children did not wander miles alone with notes containing names of strangers. Someone had sent him. Someone had led him to her. Someone who knew her. Elena spent that night awake, her mind stitching together pieces that refused to form a clear picture. She wasn't afraid of Adam. She was afraid of what he represented. A connection to her past. A secret long buried. A wound she had tried to ignore. And yet, the more unsettling clues surfaced, the more protective she felt. Whatever had happened to him, whatever had driven him into her garden, was bigger than confusion or coincidence. He didn't just end up here. He was meant to. A truth was circling around them, tightening little by little, waiting for the moment it would finally break open. And as Elena watched Adam sleep, with his small fist clenched, his breath trembling, she realized something with painful clarity. This was no random child. This was the beginning of something she wasn't ready to face. But the story had already begun, and there was no turning back now. Night had a particular way of magnifying unease, stretching silence, sharpening shadows, making every unanswered question feel heavier. For Elena, nighttime had always been the hardest part of the day, but now, with Adam asleep in the next room and a dozen mysteries circling her like restless ghosts, darkness felt almost sentient, watchful, waiting. It began with small noises, soft, irregular sounds drifting through the hallway, too delicate to be danger, but too persistent to ignore. Elena knew the normal rhythm of her house, the hum of the old refrigerator, the creak of the wooden beams, the gentle wind tapping at the windows. But these sounds were different. These were whispers, faint, thin like breath brushing against walls. At first, she thought it was Adam talking in his sleep. Childhood nightmares often spilled into murmured dreams. But when she pushed her door open and stepped into the hallway, the whispers didn't fade. They multiplied, layered, overlapping, like fragments of thoughts spoken by someone who wasn't quite there. A chill pressed up her spine. Elena moved carefully, her bare feet cold against the floor. She checked Adam's room first. He was curled tightly beneath the blanket, his face tense, his brow furrowed, as though even sleep couldn't fully protect him. But he was silent, painfully silent. The whispers weren't coming from him. They were coming from the house itself. Elena's pulse quickened. Her home had always been her refuge, a place she shaped with quietness and routine, sterilized from the haunting remnants of her past. She had worked too hard to keep it peaceful, but now it felt unstable, like the air itself had thinned with secrets. She followed the sound down the hallway, past the living room, toward the garden door, an old wooden frame with a lock that never sat quite right. As she approached, the whispers softened, as though they sensed her presence. For a moment, the house felt too still. Then, the garden lights flickered, just once, enough to fracture her breath. Elena pressed her hand against the cold glass of the door. The garden, her small sanctuary of overgrown flowers and tangled vines, looked unusually dark, almost unfamiliar. And for the briefest moment, she thought she saw a shadow move beneath the willow tree, fast, low, human-shaped. Her breath turned to ice. She stepped back. The whispers swelled again, but this time, they weren't coming from the door. They were behind her. She turned sharply, heart pounding, only to see Adam standing in the hallway, half asleep, half awake, eyes glassy with fear. His small hand was gripping the doorway as though he'd dragged himself there against his own will. "Elena," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Don't open it." Her lungs tightened. "Open what?" she asked gently. Adam lifted a shaking finger toward the garden door. His voice cracked with terror that felt far too old for his years. "He's still out there." Every muscle in Elena's body locked. "Who?" she whispered. Adam swallowed hard, tears threatening at the edges of his eyes. "The man who brought me here." The words hit harder than she expected. She crouched down in front of him, struggling to steady her voice. "Adam, did someone leave you in the garden?" He nodded, but then immediately shook his head, as though the truth didn't fit neatly into either answer. "He didn't leave me. He said you keep me safe." Adam's voice faltered. "He said you're the only one who could." Elena felt the weight of this settle over her like a suffocating blanket. Someone had sent him. Someone who knew her. Someone who believed she had a role to play in this child's protection. The whispers began again, this time softer, almost sorrowful, and Elena realized with growing dread that they weren't coming from outside. They weren't the wind. They weren't Adam. They were inside her memory. Echoes she had buried so deeply that they were rising now, clawing upward, demanding to be heard. "Elena," Adam whispered again, stepping closer to her. "He said you'd understand soon." Her heart twisted. She didn't understand, but she was beginning to fear that she would. She scooped Adam into her arms, feeling his small body trembling against her. She locked the garden door, drawing the curtains tight, shutting out the darkness that felt suddenly alive. As she carried him back to his room, the whispers faded, sinking into the walls, into the floor, into the quiet corners of her house. But the truth they carried lingered heavy in the air. Someone had brought Adam to her. Someone who knew her pain. Someone who believed in her in a way she didn't believe in herself. And as the night deepened, as the shadows clung to the edges of her home, Elena understood something terrifying. She was no longer running from her past. Her past was standing at her door. The storm arrived without warning, rolling in with heavy clouds that swallowed the sky, turning the late evening into a restless darkness. The wind howled through the trees, bending branches, rattling the old windows of the estate. Rain slapped against the roof in sharp bursts, each one louder than the last. Elena had always disliked storms. They reminded her of nights filled with fear, of memories she tried to bury, of the one moment in her life that refused to fade. Tonight, the storm felt personal, almost deliberate, as if it had come for her. She checked on Adam out of habit, wanting to be sure he wasn't frightened. His door was slightly open, allowing a sliver of hallway light to spill inside. She pushed it gently. The bed was empty, the blanket tossed aside, the pillow damp from the rain blowing through the window, wide open. Elena's stomach dropped. Adam. Her voice cracked. Adam. She searched the room, checked the closet, under the bed. Nothing. Panic surged through her so fast it made her dizzy. She ran to the hallway, calling his name again, louder this time, her voice battling the thunder outside. No answer. A childhood terror bloomed in her chest. Heavy, cold, merciless. She grabbed her coat, a lantern, and rushed out the front door into the screaming wind. The garden was drowning in rain. The path was slippery, the hedges bent under the force of the storm. She raised the lantern, its weak light struggling against the darkness. Adam, she shouted, her voice stealing away into the night. The storm swallowed the sound hole. A flash of lightning lit the entire garden for a heartbeat. In that brief, blinding moment, she saw a small figure near the old willow tree. The place she avoided at all costs. The place she had spent 20 years trying to forget. Adam. Her heart squeezed so hard it hurt. She pushed forward, fighting the wind, the mud tugging at her boots. The willow tree loomed ahead, swaying violently, its branches swirling like long arms reaching for the sky. Another flash of lightning lit the scene. Adam stood at the base of the tree, soaked, barefoot, still as stone, facing the old scar in the ground, the spot where her brother's body had lain. Elena stumbled toward him, breath shaking. Adam, she gasped. Why did you come out here? You can't. He lifted his head slowly. His eyes glowed faintly in the lantern light, not with something unnatural, but with something painfully familiar. Because you needed to remember. Her pulse froze. Adam, what are you talking about? She whispered, water streaming down her face, mixing with old fear. He stepped closer to her, his small feet sinking into the wet earth. You kept running away from this place. From what happened here? From him. Elena shook her head fiercely. I don't know what you mean. You're cold, you're scared, come here. Lightning cracked again, tearing the sky open. The willow tree shuddered. A memory flashed through her mind. Her brother's laughter, his muddy shoes, the way he ran too fast, the sharp scream, then silence. Elena blinked hard, trying to push it away. But Adam didn't let her. You couldn't save him, he said softly, voice trembling with emotion far too deep for a child. And you never forgave yourself. Her knees weakened. The lantern shook in her hand. Stop, she whispered. Please stop. But he continued, stepping closer still, rain dripping from his hair, his face pale but steady. He loved you, Elena. He didn't blame you. But you buried the memory so deep that it got lost. I got lost with it. The words hit her like a blow. She stared at him, really stared. The shape of his face. The way his eyes softened at the edges. The way his shoulders curved forward, the same way Nikolai's used to when he felt shy. Her breath halted. No, she whispered, shaking her head. You're just a boy who wandered here. Someone brought you someone. Adam stepped into the lantern glow. His expression was gentle, heartbreakingly gentle. I came because you called me, he said. Not with your voice, with your pain. The storm thundered around them. But Elena felt strangely still, as though the world had paused to give her this one impossible moment. Adam looked up at the willow tree. I'm not him, he said quietly. Not fully. I'm what was left, what your heart couldn't let go. A shadow, an echo, a piece of him that stayed because you never let yourself heal. Tears drowned her vision. Her breath broke open. All these years, all the nightmares, all the loneliness. She had chained herself to a moment she never forgave herself for. Adam reached out and touched her trembling hand. I came back so you could finally stop hurting. The storm seemed to ease around them, as if even the sky was listening. Elena fell to her knees in the muddy earth, gripping his small hands, crying with the grief she had held inside for decades. And for the first time in 20 years, she let the truth break open. The storm had quieted by morning, leaving behind a heavy stillness that wrapped around the garden like a soft blanket. Dew clung to every leaf. The earth smelled of rain and memories. Elena stood beneath the old willow tree, her clothes damp, her hair tangled, her breath still uneven from everything that happened the night before. Adam stood a few steps in front of her, small, fragile, and somehow glowing with a faint warmth that didn't belong to the cold morning. His expression was calm, almost peaceful, but Elena felt the truth pressing on her from all sides. He wasn't just a boy. He wasn't just lost. He was a piece of her past, a piece of Nikolai, come to guide her towards something she had denied herself for too long. Forgiveness. The word felt strange in her chest, as if her heart didn't know how to hold it yet. Elena sank slowly to the ground, her legs heavy and weak. The grass was cool beneath her palms. The willow branches swayed gently above them, brushing against the air like careful hands. For a long moment, she could only stare at Adam, unable to speak. Her throat felt tight, her breath unsteady. But the boy gave her time. He stood quietly, waiting, as though he knew she needed space to gather the courage to finally face the truth. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft and raw. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I've carried this pain for so long. I thought if I buried it deep enough, it would disappear. But it didn't. It stayed. It grew. It changed everything." Adam nodded gently. "It wasn't your fault." A tear slid down her cheek, warm against the cool morning air. "You were just a child," she said, her voice shaking. "And I promised I would watch him. I promised I'd take care of him. But I turned away for one moment. Just one. And then..." Her voice broke. She pressed a hand to her mouth as sobs crawled up her throat. Adam moved toward her, his small footsteps barely bending the grass. He knelt in front of her and placed his hand over hers. His touch was warm, so warm it made her breath hitch. "You loved him," Adam said softly. "And he loved you. That was enough." Elena closed her eyes as memories washed over her. Their childhood games, Nikolai's laughter, the way he used to cling to her arm, the way he sang when he was happy. Moments she had sealed away because remembering them hurt too much. Now, letting them in felt like sunlight breaking through the clouds. "I never forgave myself," she whispered. "I thought if I let go of the guilt, it meant I was letting go of him too." Adam shook his head. "Forgiving yourself is how you keep him, not lose him." The word struck something deep inside her. A space she didn't know was still tender. Her chest filled with warmth and ache, swirling together like the first soft notes of a forgotten song. She touched Adam's cheek gently. His skin felt real, alive, but something about him was changing. His outline seemed softer than before, the edges of his figure fading slightly into the morning light. The warm glow beneath his skin flickered like a candle flame. "No," she whispered, panic tightening in her chest. "Not yet. Please, not yet." Adam smiled, the same warm, crooked smile Nikolai used to have when he tried to comfort her. "It's okay," he said. "You don't need me anymore." Elena's breath trembled. "I do. I finally understand, and now you're..." "I was only here because your heart was hurting," he said gently. "Now it's opening again." His voice was soft, steady, almost angelic as the air around him shimmered faintly. He was fading, not in a frightening way, but in a peaceful, natural way, like a memory finally being set free. The garden grew quiet. Even the breeze seemed to pause. Elena reached forward and held his hands as tightly as she could, feeling the warmth slipping away bit by bit. "Thank you," she whispered through her tears, "for coming back to me." Adam's smile brightened, and for a moment, she could almost see Nikolai standing there, the little brother she lost, offering her forgiveness she never believed she deserved. Then, slowly, like the last trace of a dream at dawn, Adam began to dissolve into soft light. His form thinned, blurred, then gently drifted upward like dust catching the sun. "Goodbye, Elena," his whisper echoed, and then he was gone. The willow branches swayed softly, as if waving farewell. The garden exhaled a long, peaceful breath. And for the first time in 20 years, Elena felt something new settle inside her. Lightness, space, hope. She pressed a hand to her chest, tears still falling, but her heart no longer clenched with pain. Instead, it felt warm, full, ready. The past had not been erased, but it was no longer her prison. It was simply a part of her story, one she could finally move forward from. The days after the storm were calm, almost surreal in their stillness. The sky seemed lighter, as if the world itself had exhaled after holding its breath for decades. Elena woke each morning with a strange clarity. The heaviness that had shadowed her heart lifted just enough for her to breathe fully again. The emptiness in her home no longer felt oppressive. It felt like space, a place where something new could grow. She began with the garden. Where tangled weeds had ruled and old flowers had wilted, she planted fresh blooms, choosing colors she hadn't dared touch before. Bright yellows, soft lavenders, and whites that reminded her of mornings long past. Each seed she pressed into the earth felt like a promise to herself, that she could nurture life again, that she could allow joy to root itself in her days. Neighbors, who had once been distant in their interactions with her, began to notice the change. The woman next door, whom Elena had avoided for years, waved and offered a shy smile. Elena returned it, and for the first time in decades, she accepted the warmth rather than fearing it. The children in the village passed by the fence, curious about the newly blossoming garden, and instead of retreating behind closed doors as she once would have, she smiled. She even waved. Inside the house, the atmosphere shifted as well. Rooms that had been silent now carried small signs of life. The curtains fluttered in the breeze, the kettle whistled on the stove, and sunlight poured across the wooden floors with a sense of welcome rather than stark emptiness. Elena found herself humming softly while dusting or preparing meals, a quiet music of her own creation that made the house feel less like a mausoleum and more like a home again. She dedicated a small section of the garden specifically to Nikolai, her brother. She planted the white flowers he had loved and placed a simple stone at the center, inscribed with his name. Each time she tended that little corner, her fingers brushing the petals or the soft soil, she felt a connection to him, a gentle presence that no longer carried pain, only memory and love. The bond she had reluctantly begun with Adam lingered in her heart, shaping her new life. She often thought of him not as a child lost in the world, but as the vessel through which she finally reconciled with her grief. The fear that had once kept her isolated had transformed into compassion and courage. She realized she could care again, she could connect, and she could let people in without fearing that loss would consume her entirely. Even her daily routines, once rigid and hollow, changed subtly. She allowed herself to wake with the sun, to sit with her tea longer, to watch the garden grow in a quiet, contemplative way. She laughed quietly to herself when she tripped over her own watering hose, a sound she hadn't made in years. And slowly, her heart began to feel whole, stitched together not by denial, but by acknowledgement, forgiveness, and love. Elena knew the past would always be a part of her. It wasn't something she could erase, but now it was a part of her life that gave strength rather than sorrow. With each seed planted, each neighbor greeted, each corner of her home tidied and filled with warmth, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had survived the storm, both the literal one and the one that had lived in her heart for decades. And as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows over her garden, she realized she was ready to move forward, to embrace life again, fully and without fear. The house was alive. The garden bloomed. And Elena, for the first time in years, felt truly at peace with herself and her world. The past had been honored. The future was hers. And the promise of new beginnings glimmered with every rustling leaf and blooming petal. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky with soft streaks of pink and gold. Elena sat beneath the old willow tree, her back against its sturdy trunk, legs stretched across the damp grass. The garden smelled of earth and rain, of flowers newly planted, and old roots finally given space to breathe. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the late afternoon sun settle over her shoulders. A gentle breeze stirred, carrying the faint scent of white flowers, the one she had planted for Nikolai. And with it came a sound so delicate, so familiar, that her eyes fluttered open. It was a tune, soft, almost as if the wind itself hummed it. She recognized it instantly, the melody Nikolai used to sing, the one that had haunted her memories for years. Her lips curved into a small, unrestrained smile, not of sorrow, but of peace. Elena's fingers brushed the grass beneath her, tracing the patterns of the earth as she allowed herself to feel fully. Grief, love, regret, and forgiveness, all mingling in a quiet harmony she hadn't thought possible. The garden around her seemed alive in a new way. Leaves shimmered, petals lifted gently on the breeze, and even the old wooden swing she had long ignored creaked faintly as if greeting her return to life. She thought of Adam, the boy who had brought her to this moment, the living echo of the past that had demanded she confront her pain. She imagined him smiling, fading peacefully, knowing his purpose had been fulfilled. And for the first time, Elena allowed herself to embrace the notion that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about remembering with love, not with sorrow. The willow tree's branches swayed softly, casting dancing shadows across her face. Elena leaned back against the trunk, closed her eyes again, and inhaled deeply. The weight she had carried for so long, the guilt, the grief, the loneliness, felt lighter, almost buoyant. She opened her eyes to the horizon, the sun now a soft glow on the edge of the sky. Birds sang quietly in the distance, the sound unfamiliar and beautiful in its simplicity. Elena smiled fully this time, a smile unburdened by the past, filled only with quiet hope. She was ready to live again, to love again, to let connection, joy, and life flow through her home and heart once more. The garden, the house, the willow tree, all of it witnessed her rebirth. And beneath the fading light, Elena finally felt whole. The wind carried the tune again, faint but unmistakable, as she hummed along softly, letting the melody carry her into the promise of a future she was finally ready to embrace.